Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the Kiwi Ears Cadenza. So the Cadenza is a sort of nice looking, pretty traditional looking shell. It's got this sort of pink and black. This is the red version, which looks a little more pink, but it does say Kiwi Ears on it, and the back is black, and there's a little vent there, metal nozzle, and kind of a normal 2-pin, not the extended 2-pin like you see on other sets about this price point. So nice looking shell. This is the red version. There are, I think, two other. There are blue, green, and purple. And some of them have a black nozzle, and some of them have a silver nozzle. This one, the red version, I think two of them have the black and two of them have the silver. So that's what it looks like up close. The box does have not too much info on it. It does say Cadenza, and inside you will get 3 packs of tips. So we'll talk about this in a second, but that is set 1. This is a kind of a traditional black version. That is set 2, and then you get a white silicone version. That is set 3. And you get a cable that's not too bad. I think it's kind of reminiscent of maybe Olina. I don't know. This kind of 2-core twisted one has been popping up lately, but it's okay. Especially for the price, it's okay. So that's what we got there. So let's kind of jump into it, and we're going to go through this one kind of quickly because of this. And it is another one, and that is a shout out to Hawaii Bad Boy. Congrats on his collaborations this season. So it is another one. It is a Harman tune set. It's a very familiar sounding set. If you have, 5 or 6 other Harman sets, this one is yet another Harman set. So there has just been a lot of Harman style tune sets lately, and this is another one. And I would say just don't collect them all. I mean, they're all sort of slight flavors on each other. There's really no need to keep on picking up Harman sets expecting something different, because they're all just slight variations on each other. And you can split hairs between, these are the recent ones, Tin Hi-Fi C3, Tangzi's Warner, and Cadenza, but they're all just slight flavors of the same tuning, like I just said. So brief thoughts. Warner had that nice bass. It actually has a nice driver, but the mids are a bit forward, and I sort of complained about it. I think that's probably my only nitpick on Warner was that. Tin Hi-Fi C3, I think that one really just appeals to Tin Hi-Fi fans. If you're a brand loyalist, I think that one appeals to you. It's still, slightly brighter, and the stage and the price I think are a bit off. I think that one is the more expensive one of the trio, and I thought that price was, probably a good $10 off, maybe a little bit too high. It just separated itself unnaturally from the other two just by price. And Cadenza, again, very much the same tuning, just less quirks, I think is what I would say. They really ironed out the quirks on this one. And let's talk about some of these quirks. So when we talked about Warner, so Warner has this lower bass shelf, and that's sort of a quirkiness to it. It doesn't go deep, and it had nice mid bass, but if you were expecting those drums to go a little deeper, that one didn't. But it ended up being kind of a slightly cleaner sound. So I not really complaining about it. It's just something to be aware of that's different from the other two. So C3, I think, does have a bumped up mid bass and sub bass because it was a little brighter over here. And Cadenza is pretty much the same. Cadenza splits the middle of these two. And I can't count the number of times where I said that the set that splits the middle is typically the one that sounds the best. And I think Cadenza, it works here as well for the same reason. You kind of split the difference between these two, where Warner doesn't go deep enough and C3 is sort of bumped to balance out that brightness, cutting the middle through the nice mids. And then the rise, again, is one of these quirks where I said that that Warner actually rose a little bit too high. If they had actually taken this peak and slid it over sort of where Cadenza is, that would have been right on. It just comes across as just a little bit too forward. C3 is sort of the upper path through the treble, so it's slightly just a bit brighter than the other two. And Cadenza, it sort of keeps the detail and that separation that you get, that you need on a dynamic driver, but sort of takes a lower path from C3 through the treble, more like Warner. So a little more relaxed treble on Cadenza. So you can kind of see where Cadenza took bits and pieces from the other two that were a bit quirky and sort of split the difference and makes it a kind of smooth, ironed out version of the same tuning. So yeah, it's actually a quite nice set. And again, definitely another one. So I'm not a fan of the stock tips, and there's a pretty good reason for that. And I sort of just glossed over it, but 3 sets of tips, and they have to fit you very, very well. If they don't, you end up getting caught right here. So this Harman level pin again is actually a bit sharp for some people. And if you lose a little bit of bass leak on those tips, and you lose this little bit right here, and this becomes sharper, that's not good. So I think they did a good job of giving you 3 different tips, 3 bags of tips, and not bad, but just make sure they fit you. They didn't really fit me all that well, and I found myself pushing them in and hearing some of this bass leakage. And now I would say the same thing about all 3, is that you really need a deeper, better seal for all of those to work out well for you. Sound-wise, slight V, slight mid-bass, boosted Harman. I'm not sure how people categorize these, but it's basically a slightly bass-boosted Harman. Generally appealing, with enough bass for most people, relaxed, non-fatiguing treble, does everything well, but the master of no trade, right? All 3 of these sets do everything quite well. They don't do one thing very, very well. That's why I say don't collect all of them. One of them is probably enough, because one doesn't stand out from the other 2. And even if you go back earlier than these 3 Harman sets, they all basically all kind of sound very similar. They all have the same kind of sound to them. And if you're looking for something, the goal of this style tuning, a weighty, natural sound. So detail, people, resolution, transient chasers, you guys who put on a set and you start pinging for very tiny details, this tuning is not really going to work for you. None of the Harman style tunings, especially these bass boosted ones, they don't really emphasize that as much as a weighty, natural sound. So this is a set you don't think twice about giving as a first IEM, and I think that's very true with this set. It's a very, no matter what genre you throw at it, it's going to sound quite reasonable. It'll handle some of the bassier ones, some of the more technical ones. It does an okay job. It's sort of the master of none. Jack of all trades. It can do everything well, but does it succeed? Is it the best at jazz or R&B? No, it picks this middle of the road sound to it, and it just does well on lots of different things. So the bass, especially the bass on this one, that master of none, it's kind of got this, you wouldn't say it's a bass headset. It's got enough bass. It's not a tight, fast, hard-hitting bass. It's not a super rumble bass. It's lots of okay. So it's okay rumble. It's actually got pretty good impact and okay detail. But the real goal of this style tuning is to hit a cross-genre level, a level that works across many, many genres, across many, many playlists, and impart warmth to the sound, and it does that very well. Like I said, if you lose a little bit of that bass, it makes that upper mid a bit sharper. So you really need that mid bass slight bump to make that sound a little softer, and the whole thing comes across as a little more natural. So give people that Harman edge and separation, but soften so it's not as harsh or as forward or as sharp or as shouty, or however you like to describe that Harman pin gain area. Mids, again, inviting and approachable. This one has this kind of a relaxing sound to it. Very much a set that you just hit play on a playlist and you don't even think about it. There's nothing sharp. There's no bright spots. It just keeps on playing no matter what you throw at it. Very, very nice tuning. Bass adds the warmth, like I said. Just a touch of bleed, but generally clean enough to handle lots of genres. Like I said, it's not going to be a master at very technical music, but it'll actually do a pretty good job at it, especially for the price. It does a really good job at it. The upper mids really do give you that detail and dynamics to sound natural and engaging. On more technical music, treble on stage set up a great space to enjoy your favorite tracks in a way that wasn't possible in budget 1-D sets a year ago. And that's very much true. I think if you go back a year ago, we talk about this is another one, and there's been a whole rash of Harman style sets that are all very good. That is all very, very true. But a year ago, not nearly as true, and not nearly as true at this price point. So the treble, it definitely has that lower bias. That Harman pinna area always stands out a little bit, but there definitely are airy moments if you turn it up a bit. Even though it is a relaxed treble, it does actually extend pretty good. It does take a little more volume, and I think especially at lower volumes, it's a little hard to hear the airiness. Maybe it's a little flatter, but turn it up a little bit. There's definitely enough balance in the treble and stage for dimension. It actually does really well, kind of better than the other two at stage. It's just a more consistent, regular style stage. These aren't early roll-off treble sets from the past. Like I said, a year ago, a little bit harder to do this. Just enough upper treble energy, but the relaxed version of Vivaldi's Winter One. So if you're into lots of strings and edgy strings and soaring strings, this is going to be a relaxed version of a track like that. Just a thicker low end. When it hits those lower bits, you're going to hear it kind of resonate a little bit. You know, that is the style of this tuning, and you can kind of complain about it and say they're not technical enough, but, you know, it's a Harman style tuning. That's kind of what it sounds like. Stage, a bit better than C3 on the width and projection and imaging. So it actually corrects most of the problems that were in C3, especially on the width. And I think Kiwi Ears has put out some more expensive sets, and you can just tell on the stage it's just a more expensive sounding stage. They got the projection right. It's not sticky or your ears. It has width and it has depth and it has height. The imaging comes out a little bit better in that way. So again, it's a really small point, but this is what more expensive sets sound like. And C3 was just a bit off, and that's kind of why I say the price was just a bit off on that one. Warner basically had the height, not a ton of width either, but I think Kiwi Ears sort of, again, took the middle ground and gave you something that sounds pretty reasonable, something that sounds more like a more expensive set, and by taking that middle path between the other two, sort of ironed out those quirkiness, and stage was one of them. So that is what I got on Cadenza. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and happy holidays. I'll see you in the new year.